So, dear journalists and dear guests, welcome to the press conference. We're really delighted to have the Prime Ministers of Latvia and Lithuania and the Chancellor of Germany here in Tallinn. And they just have concluded their meeting and will deliver short remarks. After that, it is possible for media to ask questions. The press conference is held in English and German, with simultaneous translation available into both languages as well as into Estonian. The channels are first Estonian, second German, third English. And first, Prime Minister Kaja Kallas, the floor is yours, please.
Dear Olaf, Kristianis, Ingrida, dear journalists, I'm very glad to welcome you all in Tallinn. We last met in this format a year ago before the Madrid summit in Vilnius, and the year behind us has been extremely intense one. A lot has been done, many landmark decisions have been made. Ukraine has proved to the world that it can win this war with the transatlantic family right behind it. But every day, Russia's atrocities have continued. Mass killings, deportations of civilians, bombing civilians, including children. Russia is closely copying the Soviet playbook we in this region know so well. I come from the generation that didn't know freedom, and now we have freedom. I don't take it for granted. I understand that freedom is something you have to fight for. That is why I continue to advocate for Ukraine's victory. Victory that means that Russia goes back to Russia. Victory means making sure that aggression ends in defeat. Victory means an end to Russia's cycle of violence and aggressions against its neighbors. The faster Putin understands he will not reach his objectives, the sooner the war ends. Our strength is our unity, but breaking this unity is the Kremlin's strategy to win. We will prove them wrong. We cannot agree with Putin's land rout. That is why the number one focus are arms, ammunition, and training. They all must continue at the scale sufficient for Ukraine to win this war. Thank you, Olaf, for the recent historic 2.7 billion military aid package to Ukraine. The air defense systems Germany sent are playing a vital role in Ukraine's defense. Patriots are protecting Kiev's skies and saving lives. However, it's not only the battlefield success that will decide the outcome of the war. We have to show Kremlin it cannot outlast Ukraine and our world economically. So Ukraine's victory also depends on our ability to dry up Kremlin's war machine and income to finance its aggression. There's the fight for freedom, and there's also the fight for justice. Ukraine needs to win both. Without accountability, Russia's cycle of violence will never stop. Crimes without punishment encourage to inspire new ones. Russia has never been held accountable. Russian leaders today have seen from the history that their leaders in the past have never had to face justice for the atrocities committed. For peace in Europe, we need geopolitical European Union and a strong and credible NATO. For peace in Europe, we need Ukraine in EU and in NATO. We have seen throughout history how grey zones are breeding ground for wars, while NATO and EU enlargement have increased stability. The 3 Baltic states are a living example of it. And for peace in Europe, we also need German leadership, be it in NATO, in a geopolitical European Union, or in making sure Europe is able to defend itself militarily. Ladies and gentlemen, Ukraine's fight for its existence is also a fight for freedom and dignity in Europe. And Russia's aggression inevitably carries a cost to our own societies. Living next to a pariah state has its cost. We must make sure any future aggression would be deterred and pushed back immediately. Looking ahead to the NATO Vilnius summit, we need first and foremost NATO's new regional defense plans in place. We need to have them backed by necessary forces. Defense spending above 2% and increased defense investments must become common commitment for all the allies. And we also need to find ways and money to boost the European defense industry. To illustrate my concern, in real terms, in 2022, the defense spending in European allies decreased by 11.6% and not increased compared to the 2021. Estonia is taking its obligations as an ally extremely seriously. We are raising the defense spending to 3% of our GDP and continuously strengthen our national defense. To that end, Estonia and Latvia began negotiations with German manufacturers to jointly procure medium-range air defense. This is an important milestone in our cooperation to better protect our skies. We need to also look into the future and ask how to reduce our vulnerabilities and bad dependencies. So we talk about also energy. Estonia's goal is 100% renewable electricity by 2030, and offshore wind is a key for that. I'm glad that the German-Baltic energy cooperation is increasing. As an example of this, only 2 weeks ago, our transmission system operators committed to study the possibility of a new electricity cable to Germany, the Baltic Wind Connector, to utilize our offshore wind potential and boost energy security. So thank you once again for being here, and let's have a good press conference. Thank you.
Thank you. Chancellor Scholz, please.
Guten Abend, meine Damen und Herren, liebe Kaya, ich möchte mich...
Ladies and gentlemen, Kaya, first of all, I would like to thank you very much for hosting this event in Tallinn today. This is my first visit as Federal Chancellor to Estonia, and I'm delighted to be here, not only because of the historic Hanseatic link that has also been marking my personal life early on, but also because the cooperation between our two countries is so excellent. Estonia, Latvia and Lithuania work together in the European Union and within NATO. They work closely together and on a basis of trust with Germany. We are military allies, European partners and good friends. And friends help one another in need. The security situation in the Baltics on NATO's eastern flank remains delicate. This is why Germany and other allies have decided last year to deploy units to the Baltics in order to improve the security situation. NATO is a defensive alliance. It is not directed against anyone. Its members commit themselves to mutual assistance in case of a military aggression. That is our mission. And to be very clear here once again, we are ready to defend every inch of NATO territory against attacks. This is what I said about 1 year ago at our meeting in Vilnius, and I will gladly repeat it today in Tallinn. And I mean what I say. We have taken the necessary steps. We are adjusting the Bundeswehr very clearly to defending Central and Northeastern Europe. By strengthening the defense of our allies, we are enhancing security for the alliance as a whole, and thus Europe, and that's what it's about. And this has very clear consequences. In Estonia, the Eurofighters of our Air Force have been actively participating in air policing. In Lithuania, 700 German soldiers are supporting their Lithuanian comrades. The Bundeswehr took a leadership role within the NATO framework there, and in addition, we have made available a German combat brigade for defense. Part of this brigade will deploy to Lithuania shortly for additional exercise, and I was able to visit the troops last June. Our Navy has increased its presence in the Baltic Sea, and almost 17,000 soldiers stand ready within the NATO response force in order to support our allies in an emergency. All this shows that NATO and the European Union have responded quickly in a determined way and in a well-coordinated way to the Russian aggression against Ukraine. The Russian president has miscalculated. He wanted to divide Europe, but he increased our unity. He wanted to weaken NATO and obtained just the opposite. For more than 15 months, Ukraine has been bravely defending itself against the Russian aggression. In order for Ukraine to persist In this fight, we are supporting Ukraine to the best of our abilities in humanitarian ways, politically, financially, and also with arms. This solidarity is unbroken. We will also increase the pressure of sanctions against Russia, and we will take further steps to avoid loopholes. This is what we have reiterated at the G7 meeting in Japan recently, and we will also do that within the EU. To sum up, let me say it very clearly once again. Together with our friends here in the Baltics and the entire European Union and with our international partners, we continue to stand shoulder to shoulder with Ukraine. We will support Ukraine as long as it takes. Russia must recognize that this war is pointless, and it has to withdraw troops. Otherwise, there can be no peace.
Thank you. Prime Minister Karinč, please.
Thank you very much. Dear Kaja, thank you very much for inviting all of us. Olaf, Ingrid, thank you very much for a very fruitful discussion and conversation. I want to say just a few things. As leaders of liberal democracies, we understand the notion of human rights and how these rights have to be defined and, of course, defended. What we are in the process, in a sense, of relearning is that in order for liberal democracies to thrive, we have to be strong. We have to be strong not only in our moral conviction, but we also have to be strong militarily to, if need be, defend these rights, defend our way of life. In Europe, we see, as we stand here in beautiful Tallinn, enjoying the lovely spring, it seems like summer weather, not far away in Ukraine, Russia is continuing for more than a year a brutal war of aggression which is completely unjustifiable. Ukraine never has gone out of its borders, has never disturbed any neighbor. Russia is trying to destroy Ukraine, and even today, yet again, bombing of civilian infrastructure of a hospital is yet again another breach of human rights that we cannot become immune to. Now, what Putin has done over the past year is probably not what he expected, which is to make us stronger, to make us more unified. He has brought the European Union closer together, and he has given NATO a new lease on life. And it's our responsibility to make us even stronger than we are today. So in my country, in Latvia, we are currently, regarding our military capabilities, increasing on 5 different fronts at the same time. So we're in the process of getting new military kit, the HIMARS rocket artillery, medium-range air defense. Together with Estonia, we just made the decision we will purchase the IRIS-T system from Germany. We are constructing a new military base in the south of our country, and we are reintroducing conscription with the goal of reaching 3% of our GDP on defense in the coming years. So we are doing everything to make ourselves stronger. But being stronger alone is not enough. It's important that all of us in NATO do this. So it's very important that all NATO members reach at least the 2% target on military spending, and we would strongly encourage to go above and beyond that as we are doing ourselves. But the issue of Ukraine comes up all the time. And what is important for us to do is to remain 100% committed in the EU and in NATO in supporting Ukraine for as long as it takes until they liberate their country and Russian aggression ends. This will require money, this will require ammunition, this will require weapons, humanitarian aid, all kinds of aid. And we have to understand that it is as long as it takes, which could be a long haul and not just a spring offensive and then it's over. And we have to steel ourselves and our societies to this resolve. Why is this important? That if we do not succeed as the collective West in stopping and reversing state aggression against a neighbor, then the world becomes dangerous for everyone. And this is why I am convinced that at the end of the day, once the war in Ukraine is over and Ukraine has won in this war, that Ukraine should and must become a member of NATO. And the reason is very simple. That's the only way to ensure that Russia would never restart a war once this is over. Because, I stress again, Putin and Russia only respects strength. Ambiguity to Russia is weakness and an opportunity to advance. And this must be stopped. One could say that perhaps collectively in the West, the reactions which could have taken place when Russia was waging its war in Georgia should have been a stronger reaction. Or when Russia first started its war against Ukraine in 2014, should have been a stronger reaction. In a sense, Ukraine and all of us in the West are paying the price for delayed action. And what I'm saying is that now is that we have to learn from our collective mistakes, not only support Ukraine today, but to make sure that in the future, once this war ends, Russia does not restart that war. And this is important for all of us in Europe, not just in the Baltics. It's important for everyone in Europe because we need a lasting peace, but we have to understand that that peace can come only through our own strength, and we must not be afraid to build and to exercise that strength as necessary.
Prime Minister Shimonite, please.
Thank you, dear Kaya, for hosting this meeting today. And of course, coordination among Baltic states and Germany is always important, but even more so in the face of continued Russian aggression in Ukraine. I hope that we will never get used to the horrible images of war and will never start feeling fatigue of helping Ukraine to fight Russia's imperial evil. Otherwise, Russian aggression will expand one day further into Europe. Only the unity of democracies, our military preparedness, and the accountability of the perpetrators of aggression can break the vicious cycle of Russia's wars. Military aid to Ukraine is an aid to freedom, to values we stand for, and it is an investment in peace and European security. The horrors of war do not reach us today only due to heroism of Ukrainian people. By defending its own freedom, Ukraine also defends our freedom and international order based on rules and law. The urgent supply of all needed weapons to Ukraine, therefore, is essential for achieving peace. We, Euro-Atlantic community, should accept the fact that Russia is preparing for a long-term confrontation with NATO and with the democratic world. It is therefore crucial to substantially strengthen the security of the alliance and base its defense capacities on adequate financial resources. Considering the changed geopolitical environment and the threat posed by Russia, we do not have luxury of taking incremental steps. Decisions must be bold and fast. This is particularly important for the Baltic countries because of our exceptional geographical position, the neighborhood of Kaliningrad and Belarus, and the Suwalki Gap. Here, I would also like to point to the most recent developments in our region. One more nuclear saber to rattle in our neighborhood, this time in Belarus, and desperate attempts to intimidate the international community. We will not be intimidated. Unfortunately, these actions are dragging Belarus further into confrontation with the democratic world. Looking into Vilnius summit, it is essential not only to adopt NATO defense plan, but to commit adequate resources to their realization. The entire eastern border must be reinforced with air defense and with ground-based air defense capacities. We must take decisions in Vilnius to upgrade air defense capacities in the region. Our top priority should be effective deterrence so that aggressor would not even think of testing NATO's resolve and capacity to defend its every inch. For that, we need boots on the ground. And the most credible deterrence is adequate NATO forces in place. I would therefore like to thank Germany and Chancellor Scholz personally for continuous contribution to Lithuania's and region's security and commitment to increase this contribution. For that, Lithuania, as all the other Baltic countries, is doing its homework. We are building the needed military infrastructure for troop accommodation and training, for pre-positioning of equipment. Investment in defense and security increased very significantly in the region. We have already witnessed that the creation of gray or semi-gray areas in Europe leads to very dangerous developments. Therefore, signals of support for Ukrainian Euro-Atlantic aspirations must be very clear. I would like once again the Estonian Prime Minister for this initiative and my colleagues for a very fruitful discussion today. Thank you.
Thank you. Now it's possible for media to ask questions. Please state your name, media outlet you're representing, and to whom the question is addressed to. Please ask either in English or in German. First, please.
Thank you. Karoliina Vasli from Estonian news portal Delfi. And the question is for all participants. So what do you think, what should be the preconditions for negotiations for peace? Could there be any negotiations before Ukraine has liberated all of its territory? Thank you.
Olaf, do you want to start?
Just an answer to your question. It is absolutely clear that it could be not a frozen conflict. So if Russia is just thinking that it could succeed with its robbery of land of Ukraine, it will not succeed with this idea and attempt. And this is why we are supporting Ukraine as long as it is necessary. Russia must withdraw troops, and this is the basis for peace.
Yes, if I continue from here, I totally agree. It is up to Ukraine, of course, to say when this war will end and when they are able to enter any kind of negotiations. But as Olaf Scholz said, any kind of frozen conflict is a feeding ground for future conflicts, and we can't allow that. So we have to end the gray zones in Europe, or we have to end the gray zones in Ukraine as well. Thank you.
Thank you. I suppose I could continue what my other two colleagues have said. Of course, any negotiation is up to Ukraine, but it seems that the obvious starting point would be that the war will be over once Ukraine.
They are expecting a formal invitation to NATO. What do the Baltic states expect from Germany in that respect? Do you expect Germany to support this Ukrainian wish? Und Herr Bundeskanzler, Sie waren das letzte.
Mr. Chancellor, you were in the Baltics a year ago. You went to Vilnius and met with, you said you would provide a brigade for the protection of the country. A brigade consists of 3,000 to 5,000 soldiers. Lithuania expects all these soldiers to be deployed on Lithuanian ground. Can you commit to that in case Lithuania provides the infrastructure for such a deployment? And due to a current development, a second question, if I may. On Wednesday, there has been an incident, a security incident at the Frankfurt airport. A man got into your motorcade and hugged you. How do you feel about this? Was this sort of a shocking moment for you, and does that lead to consequences?
A statement that none of the countries willing to join international alliances can be stripped of the right to apply for the membership. And leaving aside the practicalities and the concrete situation now when we have a hot phase of war going on in Ukraine, of course, it would be very sad if in any way anyone could read the outcome of Vilnius summit as a victory of Russia in precluding Ukraine to join NATO one day. But I think what is very important is that the participants of the summit will find the right words and the right pathway to embody that in a decision of the summit.
Schönen Dank für die Fragen. Zunächst mal.
Thank you very much for your questions. First of all, in Vilnius, we will talk about concrete support for Ukraine in this current situation. We need to organize that support, and as member states, we will continue with our willingness to support Ukraine. In Germany's case, we've provided a lot of support, 17 billion euros worth support, and an additional package of 2.7 billion euros has just been launched. We will continue on that pathway, and now we will talk about how we can support Ukraine in concrete terms and how we can improve the situation for Ukraine. And we make it clear once more that we support Ukraine as long as it takes. Concerning the question of Germany's contribution to countries on the eastern flank of NATO, we have a diverse bouquet of support measures, not only in the Baltics. Our support is quite diverse. We have a presence of soldiers in Lithuania. It also requires infrastructure that is currently being built. We have also committed to being able to very quickly deploy troops. We are also doing exercises in order to make sure this deployment is possible. It has to be possible at any point in time. So this is what we are doing, also under the NATO framework and the decisions taken within NATO. Concerning people coming up to me and saying hello, this is not that impressive to me. It's quite a normal thing, and I didn't have the feeling that this was a very dramatic situation. The police is doing an excellent job, and I feel that I am in safe hands.
Question, please.
Guten Abend. Estnisches Fernsehen.
Estonian TV. I have a question to all of you. What do you think about a possible combat theater in Russia, on Russian territory for Ukrainian forces? It might be a tactical advantage. But Ukraine is using Western equipment, German systems, tanks. What do you say when these tanks, or what would you say if these tanks appear outside Ukraine's territory one day?
Cut.
Russia invaded Ukraine. This is why Ukraine has the right to defend itself. We are supporting Ukraine also with arms, and not only Germany, the US and many others do so too. At the same time, it is very clear that the weapons that we have delivered can only be used on Ukrainian territory. And you remember that the American president has made remarks publicly in the New York Times. This is still valid. The weapons that we deliver are supposed to be used for defending Ukrainian territory.
Says that every country has the right to defend itself, and it means that it has all the means to defend itself, and this means also that Ukraine can use the weapons that have been given to them. Ukraine does not have any wish to invade Russia. That is very clear. In this case, there is one aggressor and one victim. This is very true, and it goes with the UN Charter that, as I said, every country has the right to defend itself. How it is done militarily, it's another question. Thank you.
Even before this phase of the war started, Latvia provided Ukraine with weapons, concretely the Stinger anti-air missiles, which were used in the defense of Kiev in the very first day of the war. Ukraine is being attacked, and I think Kaya said it absolutely correctly. They have a full right to defend themselves, and we have a responsibility to help them defend themselves. It's very clear that Ukraine is not in the business of attacking Russia. Ukraine is in the business of defending its own country.
Yeah, not much to add. I'm somewhat puzzled by the worry of Russia, because Russia is at war. So it's quite strange to think that the war can only be in that other territory that you invaded. There might be incidents that happen in your own territory, as a matter of fact, and I'm not commenting the details of the supply of weapons and particular war machines and everything, but I mean, we should not worry about Russia, because as it was rightly mentioned in so many times, it's the UN Charter that allows Ukraine to defend itself, and this is exactly what Ukraine is doing.
All right, thank you. This is all the time, unfortunately, we have today. Thank you everyone for coming. Thank you, and have a good evening.